It would have been an agonizing decision.
Jamie, thanks. It's unimaginable, at least to me. Thank you for your work tonight again. We'll all be working this weekend. I was going to say have a good weekend, but that seems about the silliest thing I could think of right now.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon tonight. As the nation struggles to recover here in New York, they struggle with the rescue, and even the president noted the anger that is building in the land. The country now starts to think about how to respond to all of this. That always seems to end up in a discussion of how the military might handle it. Joining us to talk for a few minutes about our options, and there aren't a lot, perhaps, at Atlanta, General Wesley Clark joins us again tonight as he has before. And in Washington, retired Army Intelligence Officer Ralph Peters. Good evening to both of you. General Clark, let me start with you, if I may, because you wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post today where you laid out in some detail, I guess, a way to look at this. I don't want you to take all those. I don't want you to read me back all those words. Can you sum up in a few sentences at least how you think the government and the country ought to approach this?
You have to have an overarching strategy to approach this problem, and that means you've got to work within a coalition, and you've got to get other people to clean up their countries and make those hard political decisions first. It's fundamentally a police effort directed against individuals. It's not a military effort directed against factories and airfields. You may still need to use military force, but you have to use it in a very precise way. You want to end up taking out the network of terrorists, isolating them, cutting them off from all support and moral support as well as financial support, and then bringing them to justice. You use force, but you use it only as necessary. You take all possible measures to prevent harming innocent civilians.
Before I go to Mr. Peters, one quick question. I saw a poll, I think late last night, where an overwhelming percentage of Americans believed it was very likely we were going to go to war, and the question I wondered was, who are we going to war with exactly? Do we, as we sit here tonight, know who the enemy is?
We've got a pretty good idea who the enemy is. We've been watching these guys for a decade. We know their names. In many cases, we know their faces. Some of them have multiple aliases. And we know the general locations. But what we often don't have is precise predictive intelligence that lets us go out and get them at the right time. We want to operate against the cells at the bottom and the head of the snake at the top. And we need a little bit more information, and then we need some very precise strikes. But we have to remember, it's fundamentally not simply a military problem, it's an overall political military problem, because we want to discredit them and win the full campaign, not just kill a bunch of people and have another group come after us.
Turn to Mr. Peters here for a second. Anything you heard so far in this that you disagree with?
Well, I think General Clark and I agree on everything except some nuances. I do think at this point it is preponderantly a military problem. But that will shift and change. In some cases, you'll want a powerful military response. In other instances, and it is case by case, you want a pinpoint, perhaps a Special Forces A-team response. Sometimes it will be police. Sometimes it'll be economic or political. But what we must do is stop limiting our choices. And we must be willing, with steely and enduring resolve, to use every tool in the American arsenal when it's appropriate.
Mr. Peters, let's talk. What tools are we talking about? I mean, there is a kind of underlying suggestion there, and in some of the writing you've done that, these aren't your words, that we've been a little namby-pamby about this, that we need to take off the gloves. How's that? Tell me what that means.
Well, certainly you have to beware throwing a strategic temper tantrum, and I think General Clark would agree with that. But we have been very hesitant to break any rules ever. We've essentially accorded many terrorists the protections of the U.S. Constitution, although they might be in Afghanistan. The goal is frankly not to bring them to justice. The goal with terrorists is to kill them. Now, kill is the ultimate four-letter word in diplomacy. I understand that. But we've got to get past this. They've killed about 5,000 Americans. If we can find, when we can find these terrorists and their supporters, it's time to kill them. And there are times when we're going to find states sponsoring terrorists, and when they do, they need to be severely and militarily punished. I do believe in revenge, in vengeance, and I do believe in setting examples. Our hesitation about setting a ferocious example has really hindered us. You destroy one dictator and his clique, and the next 12 will think twice and 3 times before supporting another Osama bin Laden.
General Clark, what do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a very tough approach, and there are...
I would guess so. Yes, sir. That would be a very tough approach.
There's a lot of that it really strikes a responsive chord in a lot of Americans right now because we're all very angry, and I'm certainly very angry about this. We've got to keep in mind the larger objective. We've got to use force as is productive to meet our purposes. And what we really want to do is discredit this organization and take it apart. If it means apprehending and killing in the process of apprehension, that's fine. But on the other hand, what we really want is we want these people humiliated and discredited, and we want to end the terrorist challenge of this network forever. So we have to be selective in our means, we have to be selective in our targets, and we want to use the broadest array of diplomatic, economic, political, legal methods, as well as military methods. We may have a problem with states that support terrorism, and we may need to give them a hard rap. But what we don't want to do is create a martyr state and end up with a lot of people in sympathy with our adversaries. We've got the moral high ground, we want to keep it, we want to use it to win the campaign overall.
Mr. Peters, just going back to something you said a minute ago, why exactly is it better to go in there and kill them, in your words, than it is to bring them to justice? Why is that an inherently better strategy?
Well, first of all, you cannot deter or dissuade terrorists. You can sometimes deter or dissuade their supporters, the fellow travelers. But when you have people that are willing to drive a plane and kill themselves into the World Trade Center, you can't reason with them. You can't have treaties. You have to find them and kill them wherever they are. Now, I'm certainly not in favor of indiscriminate use of violence. We always have to take into account civilian casualties. And certainly, as a former soldier like General Clark, I never want to needlessly jeopardize the men and women in the uniform of this country. However, we must be willing to do what it truly takes. Now, revenge is a dish best eaten cold. And we have to be aware of doing things in anger that are flamboyant but not effective. And we have to also realize that in the war, and it will be a war against terrorism, there is no victory party. There's no surrender on the deck of the battlefield, Missouri. It's a work in progress, and you'll get progress reports. But it has to continue from administration through administration. Frankly, and this is the bad news, this struggle will endure through our lifetimes. Is it worth doing? Absolutely. Some terrorists will always get through. But by God, it's better to stop 99 out of 100 than to just throw up our arms and say, we can't do this, we can't fix this. Americans can win. We're tough. In fact, the real challenge at this point is reining in American bloodlust. When we're aroused, we're a lot meaner. Today at the National Cathedral, I think a lot of people missed the symbolism at the end. It didn't end with Give Peace a Chance. It ended with the battle hymn of the Republic.
Yeah, it was actually, it was not lost on me. I noted that today. Mr. Peters and General Clark, some very provocative points made here. We appreciate your coming in on a Friday night and sharing them with us. Thanks, and we'll, I suspect, talk again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We turn back now to New York and the events going on here, the effort to salvage what can be salvaged, to rescue those who might still be alive. CNN national correspondent Gary Tuchman joins us now from Ground Zero around the Trade Center with an update on the search that is now going on around the clock, of course, and more on the president's visit as well. Gary, good evening to you.
Aaron, good evening to you. And we are now in the midst of night number 4, the 4th night of the search for victims. Innocent civilians, people who worked in the World Trade Center, people who were going to shop at the World Trade Center shopping complex, people who were just going to the 110th story observatory for one of the greatest views anywhere. It's all gone now. These were people in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now more than 4,700 of them are missing. It's a very depressing number, but also a sad number, the number 0, and that's the number of survivors who've been found over the last 2 days. Behind me, fires continue to burn in the area where the World Trade Center used to stand. The smelly smoke continues to billow. As a matter of fact, the smoke is higher than it's been for quite some time right now. Hundreds of rescue workers are out there still looking for survivors. It's been very disappointing for them that they haven't found any. For the most part, the news media hasn't been allowed to bring its cameras right to ground zero. So today, we gave one of our cameras to one of the emergency workers. He took some pictures that gave us views of the images very close up, and it's very overwhelming. So far, over 10,000 tons of rubble has been taken away from here to a local landfill. That is a total of 20 million pounds, but it almost makes no difference. That shows you how much rubble is there. I was there myself at Ground Zero 2 days ago, and it looks almost the same. So it shows you just how much is there right now. Many workers there are very concerned about several buildings surrounding the World Trade Center area. There are structural deficiencies. The mayor of New York City today, Rudy Giuliani, said that buildings are not in danger of collapse, but many people are very worried nonetheless. Now, many of the emergency workers we've talked with said they do believe their spirits were lifted by the visit of the President of the United States today, George W. Bush. But they also know about reality, and that reality is it's very possible that down the road we will all find out that nearly 5,000 people are buried under this rubble where the World Trade Center used to stand. Aaron, back to you.
Gary, before you get away, you have been down there for the last couple of days, very close in. The clock is ticking. This is a very cold reality, but if there's anyone alive, they've been without water now for 4 days. They surely have existed in some sort of air pocket. That may be running out. Do you note in the rescue workers, the firemen and the rest who are down there, that they are losing hope?
I think it's fair to say, Aaron, that yes, they are losing hope. They really thought over the first couple of days they'd find many survivors, because the survivors they did find, the few in the first 2 days, were in pockets they call voids. They believe there is perhaps 40 or 50 feet below the wreckage where people could be, but they haven't been able to get down there. Most of these people were convinced there are people down there, but the sad reality is they haven't found anyone alive over the last couple of days, and that is not good news.
Gary, thanks. You've been very enterprising this week. Thanks a lot for your work. We appreciate it very much. On this question of hope, we rather suspect that hope is running out a bit too for those many people who have gathered at the Armory in New York. This is the place that has been set up for people who believe someone is missing to come and try and get information about them. It's where Elizabeth Cohen has spent the last couple of days talking with those people, those men and women, and she joins us with some of their stories. Elizabeth, good evening to you.
Aaron, good evening. We just heard from Gary Tuckman at Ground Zero, which is the site of the physical devastation, and here at the Armory is the scene of emotional devastation. This is where families come who are still missing people. They come in, they give information, 8 pages worth of details about the person's physical appearance. They're then shown 2 lists. One is a list of people who have been found in the hospital. Another is a list of people who have been found deceased. We're going to talk with 2 people right now who have been in the Armory today. Paul Rodriguez is looking for his uncle, Juan Garcia, and he's joined by Joanne Garcia, who is Juan Garcia's daughter. Tell me, I see on this poster here that your uncle was employed by Cantor Fitzgerald, a major bond company. I've seen that name so many times. I know you've met with some of the employees. How are they feeling?
Right now, everyone's a bit despondent right now, because as the days roll by, hope is starting to dwindle a bit, but everyone's still very optimistic that we are going to find everybody.
And have people been helpful with each other since all of these missing people worked in the same company?
Actually, they've been extremely helpful. For the most part, when people are looking at the sign, they feel like that Juan is part of the family, so to speak, and in theory he is. Everybody's asked, have you seen this, did your father know this person, that person? So, yes, everyone's been extremely helpful, and we've been reciprocating that to them.
Joanne, your father has now been missing from...
Elizabeth?
Yes, Aaron?
Let me interrupt you for a second. We're going to come back to you in a second. Stay where you are, okay? Let me just go to Las Vegas. That's the Strip in Las Vegas live. And in just a moment or two, That is the Strip in Las Vegas. There's probably more light bulbs on those blocks than just about anywhere in the world, we would guess. And in a moment, one of many vigils, I guess, that have been going on, they are, as you can see, on the Strip in Las Vegas, dimming the lights. I don't know that that means that the lights are going out in the casinos, but they are on the Strip at least, dimming the lights a little bit. And we just wanted to show that while it was happening. Now let me go back to Elizabeth. It's a very difficult thing, Elizabeth, to ask you to do, to pick up your reporting where you were, but I'm going to ask you to do that nevertheless. That's still Las Vegas, of course. The MGM Grand Hotel. The lights on the faux Eiffel Tower there going out. It's a little bit eerie. An awful lot of light around it, but you can see the lights on the Strip at least dimming. Okay. Just wanted to get that in while we could, while it was happening. Let's go back now to the Armory. And Elizabeth, go ahead and pick up your stories where you can, if you can.
Well, let me recap then. We're talking with two cousins, Raul and Joanne, who are looking for Joanne's father, Juan Garcia. He's here with Joanne's son, so his grandson. And I was asking you, 3.5 days after the explosion, almost 4 days, has your hope waned? Has it lessened?
Well, honestly, yes, it has. But all we can do right now at this point is just have faith and keep our prayers in mind and just pray and just have hope and never give up.
And never give up. What I'm hearing, Aaron, is over the past few days is that on Wednesday, on Thursday, I ran into very few people who said that their hope had waned. Their hope was at a high level. Today I'm hearing, and really at the end of today, I've been hearing for the first time that people are beginning to lose some of that hope, just as the rescue workers who were with Gary Tuckman beginning to lose some of that hope. I believe that I have another gentleman here who is looking for a loved one, a Port Authority police officer, Paul Juergens. Tell me, Paul is a friend of yours?
I'm missing my brother, Pablo Ortiz, and my neighbor came across and told me that he was missing his brother-in-law. He told me that he went to the work and he was missing, and I was shocked. I saw you yesterday and you told me that I lose hope, and I told you I wasn't sure, and now I have hope. I have hope because a lot of people out here, and I'm out here, and I'm trying to help. I have hope, and my neighbor gave me this picture of his brother-in-law, and my brother's missing, and his brother-in-law's missing, so there's hope that we'll come together and we'll find these people.
So your brother is missing, you're helping someone find his brother-in-law,
yes.
And you still have hope.
Now
Still
I
have hope.
lots of hope. God bless
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, so many stories like this here on the corner of 26th Street and Lexington Avenue. Aaron?
Yeah, so many indeed. Thank you, Elizabeth. It was difficult the last couple of days when people were hopeful. It is especially so as they lose hope, isn't it? On the subject of the missing and locating people, we'll give you one more option here. You can email photos of missing friends or relatives to missing, this is an email address, missing@cnn.com, or just go to cnn.com and you'll see a link there that will take you to that. And then you email the picture, and also you need to send at the same time an emergency contact phone number, so if in fact someone does locate the person, they can get in touch with you. So be sure and do that. This might be particularly helpful to people living overseas. A number of the people who are missing worked in the office buildings are from overseas, and this might be a way, at least for them, to draw some attention to their loved one on the website at cnn.com. We move along. We mentioned this earlier, I guess briefly. The president declared this a national day of mourning, and it was indeed. These are pictures. This is Seattle, I believe, and it is tape. A little bit ago, in Seattle, Washington, out on the West Coast. Look at all those candles. This is now live. A lot of people, obviously, who have gathered there to say a prayer, to be together. Being together in times like this is pretty important stuff. Someone told me this afternoon that they felt like they'd been a shut-in for the last 4 days, glued to their television sets and following this in a kind of glazed depression, that they were glad to get out and be among people again, and that is what they are doing in a number of places, including Seattle right now. That's very pretty, isn't it? That's something. Across the United States, there have been lots of these, to be honest. In Boston, there's a candlelight vigil that went on tonight. It's the kind of scene that was played out, as we say, in a number of different cities. This is the one in Boston, but it could have been Birmingham, Alabama as well. In Birmingham, people gathered, as we said. There is just something nice about being with other people. And that seemed to be what people wanted to do tonight. They did it in Pennsylvania, too. A prayer service was held in Somerset, Pennsylvania, at the county courthouse there. That is not far from where the fourth of the hijacked planes crashed on Tuesday morning. Somerset, Pennsylvania is about 80 miles or so to the south of Pittsburgh. And it's not just in this country that vigils were held. They were held all around the world today. In Ottawa, the Canadian Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, led one. He said of his country's relationship with the United States, "Our friendship has no limit." In London, heads were bowed in 3 minutes of silence, excuse me, during an emergency session of the Parliament there and on the street as well. And you could see this too in Berlin.
Amazing grace, how sweet.
Hundreds of thousands of Germans gathered to remember those who lost their lives in the terrorist attacks on Tuesday. After the ceremony, there was a march for peace on the streets of Berlin. And perhaps this is one we ought to know too. In Iran, where they've considered the United States an enemy for the last 2 decades, even there was an unprecedented show of sympathy for those who lost their lives. 60,000 spectators and soccer players observed a moment of silence at a stadium in Tehran before a World Cup qualifying match. Iranian leaders have strongly condemned Tuesday's attacks, something a U.S. State Department official has said they hope to be able to build on in the future. On this National Day of Prayer and Remembrance, people gathered in churches and synagogues and in mosques around the country to remember the victims. In Washington, the National Cathedral was the site of a solemn and quite emotional midday prayer service attended by 4 past presidents, many current leaders, and more. Here's a look at what went on.
On this National Day of Prayer and Remembrance, we ask Almighty God to watch over our nation and grant us patience and resolve in all that is to come.
Underneath the debris is a foundation that was not destroyed. Yes, our nation has been attacked, but now we have a choice, whether to implode and disintegrate emotionally and spiritually, or whether we choose to become stronger, to rebuild on a solid foundation.
We read these lines, we as Americans reaffirm our faith and our hope that security and peace will be fully restored in our country.
War has been waged against us by stealth and deceit and murder. This nation is peaceful, but fierce when stirred to anger.
Keep our country strong for the sake of the good and righteousness, and protect us, our Lord, from all evil. Amen.
The National Cathedral today, this afternoon, It was quite a scene when you looked at all of those people who were there. We want to continue on this theme for a couple of minutes. We're joined tonight from California by the Reverend Robert Schuller. Reverend Schuller is extremely well known. I think people have seen him on television and other places for a long, long time. He's the minister of the Crystal Cathedral in Los Angeles, the author of In Search of Morality. And I have a number of things I want to ask you about, but on the subject of morality, we were talking just a few moments ago, I'm not sure you were able to hear it, but we were talking about military options and how the United States might go, and one of our guests suggested just go in there and kill people, essentially, who are responsible for this. So let me frame it very simply. Let's assume for a second that Osama bin Laden is responsible for this. Is it moral? Is it consistent with Christian theology and philosophy and to go in there and kill him?
The real question when that subject comes up is, who should have the privilege of continuing to live, not is it wrong to kill? If someone is going to attack your wife and kill her, you would in self-defense kill the intruder. So it's perfectly appropriate to kill people who are out to kill others. And there's always the clash between justice and mercy, but this is no time to sin on the side of mercy.
Why is it no time to sin on the side of mercy, by the way?
Because we have to be very sure that we have expressed justice adequately and appropriately.
And that is the way justice in this case is expressed.
Justice in this case is to find those guilty of this horrendous crime against God and against humanity and against religion and against civilization.
I think among, to people like yourself, to clergymen and women, the question most asked is this one this week. How does a loving God let this happen? And we've heard a number of people try and answer that in a way that makes sense to many of us today. Let me give you the opportunity to take a stab at what is, I think, one of the more profound questions you could possibly ask.
I think it's very obvious. The only way God could have prevented an evil person from doing it is to take complete control of all human beings, and then we cease to be persons. We become puppets, and God created persons, not puppets. And so humans can be the instrument of the devil and can exercise enormous evil. But when that happens, God moves in, and God will have the last word, and God will be good. People so often say, where is God when a tragedy like this happens? My God, he was the first one on the scene, in firemen who rushed in, never to come out alive. In policemen, in common, simple human beings who shared their care with their tears and their blood. I've never in my life, and I've been a pastor 51 years, and I'll be 75 years old in 2 days, I have never before seen the whole world cry, weep, mourn the way they are today and this week. And the tears are tears of caring and loving and compassion. Never has the world been so united in a sense of compassion and hurt. This is the presence of God.
Do you worry that this concern and compassion that you see a loving God blessing us with is ephemeral, that it doesn't last, that we move on at a very convenient moment, we go back to our normal lives and our normal duties, and we forget?
Well, that's a very strong possibility, and that's where the spiritual leaders of the world are coming in all together tonight to call people to get back to their church, back to their synagogue, back to their mosque, back to their temple. I lived through World War II, and right after the Second World War was over, and while it was being waged, people were close to God. But then we became rich, and then we became a nation of peace before we know it. And there's a Bible verse, woe to those that are at ease in Zion, and life's been pretty easy for us. And I would call upon all people to find a church, find a synagogue, find a mosque, find a temple, go there every week, draw close to God, and keep this nation what it is in this moment, a very beautiful country,